The Merry Pranksters, Chapter 9, Episode 1 of Season 2. When the sound of pills rattling around in my prescription bottle went from the high-pitched clatter of two maracas shaking to the hollow echo of a wishing well, I knew I could avoid whatever cruel reality awaited me no longer. Lying here, my bed feels less plastic somehow, and almost plush. How much time has passed is impossible to gauge, except for tracking the vicious cycle of pain. Fighting off the agonizing torment until the off-brand vodka and prescription oxycodone have a chance to kick in, and I'm able to once again return to the welcoming arms of Morpheus. There, for an eternal moment, I would usually find myself at Busch Stadium on a scorching summer day chasing Valerie around a Cardinal game. Destined to always be one step behind, she leads me through the bleachers. Somewhere around the seventh inning stretch, the sky would turn to blood red and the shape-shifting dragon god would take flight, leaving me wondering what she sees in them. Always with one eye on Val, practicing her magic tricks until she would become lost in a sea of faceless spectators. The harder I strained to keep up, the more she'd fade away. Then, in the distance, I'd hear a familiar voice shouting an exaggerated, "Cold beer!" And in the next moment, Demeen would be there next to me, spilling Budweiser and swearing, "Quit sweating me, Whitey! I knew you devils was gonna smell like white bitches!" Until inevitably, like an unfaithful alarm clock, the stinging pain would tell me I was no longer dreaming. I blinked once, then harder a second time before reaching over the side of my mattress for the bottle, only to find my arm flailing around the side of the bed like a madman. Ruined to find there is no vodka to grab nor pills to swallow, my hand blindly punches around, swatting at thin air. Though my vision is obstructed by layer upon layer of crusty bandages and cheap Russian booze, my old mattress feels firm somehow, welcoming, like I'm floating on a fluffy lacrosse down comforter. Sliding all the way down from off my bed to my feet, I stumble my way through the dark and unfamiliar bedroom, bumping into antique furniture like Helen Keller in the depths of a laudanum binge. Trying to unwrap the first layers of bloody gauze mummifying my face, with one hand on the doorknob, the first thing to come into focus is a flowery strip of pearl-white Corinthian molding lining the ivory door frame. I look it up and down curiously before I turn the brass handle and open the door into the awaiting living room. Each one of the four lights gleaming in the Ulfin antique chandelier produced enough power to cause me to wince back when it hit me like an exploding hydrogen bomb. The warm shot of luminescence amplifies the mischievous shadow puppets haunting the living room walls where Dickie stands from a tall bar stool. He allows a glossy wooden pool cue to slip down slowly between his fingers until it hits the tiled floor with a dull thud. Hank's eyes widen, leaving a perfectly lined up shot on the black felt billiard table in the center of the living room. Resting his frosty draft beer down on a black marble coaster that is sat in the middle of a glass Noguchi coffee table, he and Dickie shout, "Schultz, you're alive!" Hank walks across the living room to the Howard Miller Libby bar and pours me a tall Jameson on the rocks and a glistening Golddinger Dublin whiskey glass. Walking me over the drink, the two of them joke that I must have run out of painkillers, while I'm struggling to unpeel the remaining layers of gauze. Dickie makes an effort to speak softly when he tells me to drink up, and I eyeball the bursting crystal design on the glass with a queer once-over. As I'm taking the drink, he calls me Mijo with endearment and tells me for a second time that he's glad I'm not dead. They both start to move in for a hug, but I wave them off. There's a lot to soak in here that I'm just not buying. I'm trying to rub the fog from my eyes, only to be met with the glare of the sparkling Yamaha drum set resting behind the new Marshall stack. Gently unraveling the final bandages caked with bits of dried blood and skull carefully from my head, I tell them they can both tongue my balls. Dickie removes a pair of Ray-Bans from his face and looks to Hank for solidarity, and he offers it readily. The two share a pathetic look of empathy that makes me want to snap one of the pool cues over my knee, toss it to the tiled floor below, and tell them to fight to the death for it. It's then that I realize that two things can be true at once. They can both be diverting their gaze away from me because the scars on my face do look as bad as they feel, while simultaneously shying away from eye contact to avoid my accusations of sabotage. Dickie begs all of us, himself included, to take a deep breath, like he's going to get us all through this, and I mock him severely for it. He tucks a lock of hair behind his ear and holds both hands out passively between the three of us, assuring Hank that it's just the pain meds talking, and not some vindictive accusation. He convincingly tells me that everything's cool, that Fook was able to smooth things over with Megami, and our shit is still blowing up on Horace. While I don't think he's lying, with this amount of opiates and booze coursing through me, I'm far too numb not to choose my battles carefully. I decided to put this mysterious showroom aside for now. When I press for more details about the gig, they seem baffled as to why I would even bring that up. I take my drink and set it on the oriental coffee table, take a deep breath, and lay out as much of what I can remember from that night as best I can. Some of the questions that need to be answered include, but are not limited to, the start time for our full set and why we keep having violent run-ins with Ponyboy and the Greasers. Spinning the pool cue casually between his fingers, Hank steps back from the stainless steel pool table with sharp lines and daring angles and begins explaining, "Dude, what happened was," as if he were struggling to retrieve from his long-term memory the details from that night of our gig once upon a time. He sits down on a tall stool with a worn look. The armrest is accentuated with antique brass nailheads and deep black leather that makes a sharp, creasing noise as he swivels. His tone is measured and uncritical, telling me it was all a simple misunderstanding. All the brightest minds have long since moved on, he tells me, and I should consider doing the same. Still, my questions are begging to be answered like a classroom full of petulant schoolchildren. I can feel my wires beginning to cross, but somehow these smooth little pills have a hip way of saying, if I just take it easy, all of this will sort itself out, in a way I never could. I rattle my glass at Dickie, and while he freshens up my beverage, I take a moment to let my eyes linger on the Scarsdale thermal drapes dancing in the passing breeze through the open French windows. As much as I'd like to move on and tackle some other pressing questions, like how the ice stays frozen in the brass ice bin resting atop the marble bar top, unfortunately, one stubborn hand in my mental classroom refuses to lower itself. Maybe it was the way the two dipshits stammered through every explanation with, "Well, Fookie said," that wouldn't allow me to let it go. Still unconvinced that the two of them were simply innocent bystanders in this nefarious scheme, I listened with skeptical levity as they volleyed back and forth, desperately trying to string together the narrative. I laughed, and I laughed out loud when they finally managed to agree on the story Fook had sold them on. As it turns out, the mythical leprechaun is not a fairy tale after all, but a malicious drug lord on a quest for vengeance, and it was he and his lackeys who were behind the sabotaged first gig at Cooper's. Shifting to the edge of the black leather cushion, I inhale a sharp breath, causing a rib-clutching cringe. I want them to know that I have a point here, and I'm going to make it. I also need them to feel how painful these mental gymnastics are for me, both physically and emotionally. I direct my question at Dickie, not Hank, who is less open-minded. All right, given all that is true, I'm making eye contact with each of them. Then how the fuck did I have the right time? They don't look so much at each other as they look to each other, as Dickie raises an eyebrow. The blood rushes from Hank's knuckles, and through his pulsating veins in search of an extremity to blame. In their own way, they both share a look like they're watching a spell being broken, as if the walls of an ancient cathedral are crumbling to the ground and they're realizing that they had both somehow aided the destroyer. I grab the Jameson and take a long pull before unmercifully asking, "What? Did you think I just guessed?"